Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 17th episode of Kouryer podcast. Today, I'm joined with Mr. James Tralie. He's a 3D artist from Washington, D.C., professionalizing in 3D art and specifically Blender software and also video production. And he's currently working as a content creator at NASA. So, with that introduction out of the way, give us a little introduction on how we got into visual arts and design.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It's really cool to join you in this conversation. Yeah, so I got into visual arts, I guess, originally through Photoshop, doing these kinds of digital collages, if you will, where you kind of mesh a variety of different photos together to create these dreamscapes. But I kind of felt like I hit a wall a bit with that, where there are so many other compositions I wanted to make, but you're kind of limited by the photography that you're using. I would often get my own pictures from places where I'd go for photo journeys, and then kind of combine those with photos you could find for royalty-free online. But I really wanted to kind of create my own scenes and be able to move the camera inside those scenes. So I started to get into 3D work, beginning with actually Cinema 4D and Octane. Back in college, I did like a lot of animation work with that, a bit of design work with that. And then recently, I've migrated over to the free software, Blender. I use that a lot for my projects for NASA, making animations, visualizations for all of our planetary science missions. And then also for a lot of my personal freelance projects for musicians and artists and various companies, and also for stuff that you see on Instagram, these kind of dreamscape 3D otherworldly places where you can kind of picture yourself in this nice, calm environment. It's always a learning journey. I'm always trying to learn new software, new skills. And I found that the community is extremely helpful and really gets you up to speed with the software very quickly, which is fantastic.
All right, and were you originally studying art and design, or you were pursuing another career path?
Yes, that's a great question. So I actually was a geophysics major in college, so very much the science route. I guess I'd originally considered doing a PhD and then doing some kind of research position. But now I actually get to kind of do the best of both. So at NASA, I get to combine my left brain and right brain. So I'm doing work in film and animation, but for science. So I'm still tapping into a lot of the skills that I studied in college and throughout my life, I guess, for science and math and engineering. But I get to make films and do photography and things I love creatively as well. So it's a really nice blend of the two. So it's kind of a dream career, just fantastic.
All right, that sounds awesome. What is your main branch of design that you're focusing on? And tell us about your experience from the start of it until now.
Yeah, I guess I really like environment art and concept art, kind of making these places that I would like to visit, just spend some time relaxing in. So I've kind of gotten into that, I guess, recently, really doing a lot more work with that in Blender and now a bit more in Cinema 4D as well, kind of with both of them. But it's a really fun process, kind of just building these scenes out from primitive objects like cubes and stuff to larger and larger scenes. And you add in mountains and foliage and landscapes. And it's really fun kind of building out from that. It kind of harkens back to like building with like Lego sets or something. You're kind of putting all these pieces together to create a larger scene. It's a lot of fun.
And how does your design process usually go anytime you want to start working on a design project?
Yeah, I like to begin sometimes by sketching things out, either with pencil and paper, or actually you can sketch in 3D, I kind of like to call it, where you're just kind of stacking objects together, moving things around, kind of orbiting the camera around your viewport to find new perspectives on something, to see if you can build out a scene from what you're looking at. I definitely source a lot of inspiration for my work too, mainly from photo walks, actually. So I really like to go for walks out in nature, outdoors. I usually bring my camera along with me and take some pictures when I go for walks and hikes. And then I kind of build off that catalog of photos and experiences and memories to create these scenes, and often go back and look at these things again just to make sure I'm getting the lighting set up that I want, the perspective that I want on nature to really show the grandeur of everything. And just build out from there. It's really fun. And then I always go back. It's a very iterative process. You're going back constantly and changing things like tweaking textures, tweaking lighting, composition, moving your camera around. And even months later, I'll revisit old projects and see if with new skills and new insight, new perspective, I can come back and change something and fix it up and make it different. So that's always a really fun process.
All right, now by the way, I'm going to put the link of the website down in the captions as well. So for anyone who was curious listening, they can check as well. I kind of took a peek of your website and your works, and I want to I want you to go in depth on some of them. For example, there was like this video where you basically simulated and animated like the landing of challenges. I think of one of the satellite landings, if I'm.
Oh yeah, Osiris
right?
Rex probably.
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
that was it.
Yeah.
On the videos.
Yes, you want me to talk a bit about that one?
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Yeah, so that was a mission that back in October of this past year, October 2020, it was orbiting this asteroid that's about the size of the Empire State Building, so a really small target and also very, very weak gravity field. So it's incredibly challenging and complex to actually even orbit it and stay in a safe orbit around this really small object. But the goal of the mission was actually to descend down to the surface, grab a sample, and then jet back to Earth. So it actually was successful with that. And back in October 20th, it actually made its approach very, very slowly down to the surface, tagged the asteroid, collected that sample, and then now it's starting to prepare to make its journey back here to Earth. In a couple of years, it'll actually deliver the sample by 2023. But it was a really fun process making those videos for the mission because I actually tapped into real data from our science team. So they'd been imaging the asteroid for months, almost a couple of years actually, leading up to making its sample collection attempt. So I had a really vast catalog of images and data to source from to create these videos. So one of the videos I made was actually this 360 VR experience where if you have like a VR headset, or even if you just have like your phone, you can plop yourself down on the surface of the asteroid and look up and like orbit your phone around or orbit your head around to look around as Osiris Rex comes in to collect a sample. So it's a really cool immersive experience. And I'm looking to make some more stuff like that soon now that we have even more data from the actual sample collection event. And some of the other videos too that I worked on, the one you mentioned about the simulations of what could go wrong. We made this what if video, we called it, kind of like a challenges of tag video, where we showed all of the possibilities of failure. Because, I mean, obviously these missions, you want it to go well, but you prepare for the worst and try to adapt to those situations. So, I mean, when you're operating on something that's over 200 million miles away, the probability of failure is pretty high, but we try to limit that as much as possible. So we went into the in depth of how the team actually prepared the spacecraft from a distance to steer itself. They actually programmed it to use its onboard catalog of images to navigate itself autonomously down to the surface. So that was a really fun video to create because I kind of wanted to show what it would look like from the spacecraft's perspective as it made its descent to the surface, how it images as it makes its approach, how it's updating its location and firing its thrusters to steer itself slowly. It was a really cool process, and I think the result was pretty successful.
All right, and who are your favorite artists and designers that have inspired you the most in your works?
I think it's a good question. There's a lot of different sources, but for me, I feel like I'm always going back to Impressionist artists. I'm very much inspired by Claude Monet, Vincent van Gogh, a lot of these painters, and their kind of way of capturing not necessarily just the location, but the experience you have at a location. And I think that's what I'm always constantly trying to strive to do with my work. It seems like it's a real place. It seems like it's a place maybe from your memories. There's almost this like nostalgic experience that I'm trying to create. And I think that Impressionist artists capture this perfectly, where you have the essence of the place and it's just removed enough from reality that it kind of feels like this dreamscape, this dream that you're escaping into. So I really am inspired by their work, and very lucky to actually, in my undergrad experience at college, in our art museum on campus, there are a couple really classic Claude Monet Impressionist paintings. So I would like to go and actually see those in person, which is really cool. So it was really fun to kind of source from those. And then I'm always inspired by other creators on Instagram too, and elsewhere, like ArtStation and stuff like that. You mentioned you interviewed with Christian before, No Creative Abode on Instagram. His work's really cool, and a lot of creators like him are really cool and supportive. And I think that they definitely push me and inspire me to improve my own skills as an artist and as a thinker. And I definitely like to ask a lot of questions, and I'm always happy to answer questions too. If anyone ever has any questions on my Instagram or YouTube, I make tutorials. So it's just such a supportive community, and I think we all kind of inspire and push each other to be better and do better work consistently. So, yeah.
All right, and next question. What is the main subject of your artworks and what made them interesting to you?
Yeah, as I was saying, I guess this environment artwork is what I'm most interested in. I haven't done as much, I guess, character design, but I really am interested in concept artwork and creating these dreamscape dream places. And I'm always inspired by just creating this relaxing, nostalgic experience for viewers. And this was especially true right back at the beginning of quarantine with the pandemic going on. I just felt like I was missing seeing my friends. I was missing hiking out in the outdoors with people. And so I kind of wanted to bring the outdoors indoors. So around, I guess, back in like February, March, April of this past year, I started working on this series I called The Great Indoors, where you kind of have this blend of the outdoors and the indoors in these dreamscape places. So like you're waking up from a bed and there's these flowers and trees and foliage around you. It's a really cool experience that I'm trying to create, I guess, with each piece to really immerse the audience in my own world and kind of what I'm thinking and trying to escape to these dream places from oftentimes the harsh reality of the real world. I mean, it's not been a great year, I guess, last year and going into this year too. So I'm always trying to create, even just for that tiny little moment, just a relaxing experience for viewers. And for myself, I guess it's always relaxing making these artworks as well too, I found.
All right. And how, in your opinion, how to simplify the start of the learning process? And let me reiterate the question in a different way. Mm-hmm. Like you see, for example, when someone asks, for example, an artist, all right, a master at their art, at drawing, like how to get good or start drawing? How can I start, basically kickstart the start of my drawing journey? And a lot of times, people would just say, just do it. And that's not actually a wrong answer, but the problem with that is there's no specification, how to do it. Like, what do you mean exactly by how to do it?
Yeah.
And I was wondering, in your opinion, how to simplify the start of the learning process for 3D art or, anything you're specialized in?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think for software like Blender, especially, since it's a free software, there are so many resources that people have made in the form of tutorials. I myself have contributed to this as well, which is fantastic on the one hand. But on the other hand, it's incredibly overwhelming because there are just so many resources that you don't even know where to start. And as a beginner kind of going into the field, you can get extremely overwhelmed very quickly, because you feel like you need to master everything. You see tutorials on modeling, you see tutorials on texturing and shading and node editing, you see tutorials on compositing and landscape design, just so many different things going on. So it's hard to really just focus on one. So you mentioned just get started. I think that's actually a good piece of advice in many ways. Just pick one tutorial or just pick one area that you're somewhat interested in and just start messing around. I feel like that's how I learned 3D the quickest, was just making mistakes, just going through and trying to create something that I was interested in doing and making mistakes all along the way. And then you seek out the help when you need it. So I wanted to learn, how to do texturing better. So I sought out tutorials in that and just interact with the community. It's such a welcoming community. Just feel free to reach out to creators. Like I said earlier, I'm happy to answer any questions that people have about 3D, about design, about how I made some image. We're always happy to walk you through and talk you through the process. But yeah, just getting started, it's incredibly overwhelming. But that's why I think the fact that Blender is free, it's a really great starting software. Now it's becoming almost more of an industry standard, I'd say. A lot of studios are starting to pick it up. Like I said, I actually use it for some of my NASA projects, in addition to software like Cinema 4D. But for a lot of the software, there's a barrier to entry in terms of the cost that goes into it. So like Maya, Cinema 4D, they're all paid software. You can get trial versions, certainly, but Blender is totally free. So there's nothing wrong with just downloading it and giving it a shot because it is free, so you might as well give it a go and just see if you like it or not. And it's really easy to get overwhelmed. I still do get overwhelmed at times because there's just so much to learn always, but you have to have the mindset of always being able to be open to learning new things. It's always a learning process. It's always growing. You're never going to know everything. There's always more things to do and learn, which is what I find so exciting about 3D software, is that there isn't really a limit to what you can do with it. You can kind of just keep pushing it and continuing to develop your skills long into your career. You can ask any artist. People who've been in the industry for decades. They'll tell you the same thing. It's always a learning process. There's always new tricks that you can incorporate into your workflow and new software that's being developed to expedite X, Y, and Z of the rendering process. But yeah, it's such a great community to join.
All right. And any advice and tips for a good portfolio and resume for artists?
Yeah, it's a tricky question because I guess it depends very much on what you're looking to apply to, like for jobs or for freelance opportunities. If a company is asking for someone who knows how to make landscapes or art like that, you want to kind of tailor your portfolio to that when you're applying to things, and your resume especially as well too. You want to ask if like they're looking for certain skills. You want to make sure that maybe you learn that software, or at least know it well enough that you can just hit the ground running well enough on your first day at the job and continue to learn. I often look at other people's portfolios too to just kind of see what people are putting out in terms of work. I think it's helpful to see really good examples of reels that are out there and just look through those and kind of get an idea for what people are putting out, what the caliber of their work is like. But yeah, it's tricky, and I guess it very much depends on what you're applying to. So there's not like a one size fits all type thing. It's always adapting it to whatever is in demand for that position or role.
All right. And what are you working on right now that you can tell us about? What kind of project is it? Like, I mean, of course, if the project you're working on, like there's agreements that you shouldn't talk about, sure, fine, we can skip to the next question. But I was wondering if there's anything going on.
There's a couple under NDA, so I can't talk about those. But I do work on a lot of planetary science missions for NASA. So I'm continuing to do some work for OSIRIS-REx, the mission we were talking about earlier, which is a lot of fun. Then I've also started work on a mission called Lucy, which will be launching in November of this year on a 12-year-long mission to the Trojan asteroids. They're at Lagrange points in front of and behind Jupiter. And they actually hold clues to a lot of the origins of our solar system. So by studying them, we'll learn about what it was like back at the beginning, back when all the planets were beginning to form. So that's a really cool mission. And so I've started to do a bit of work for that. I actually released a couple weeks ago the first episode in this cartoon series that I'm working on for it. You can actually see it front and center on my website. It's for the Lucy mission, if you see that. But it's a really fun animation, so I'm doing a lot of work on that. And then for my own freelance projects too, I've been trying to do a lot more tutorials for the community. I actually started a Patreon recently that I've been making, kind of operating it like a teaching assistant. So if people have questions, specific questions about things, they can ask on there, and I'm happy to make tutorials, very specific tutorials for their questions to walk them through and kind of serve as like a IT support in a way to walk them through problems and teach them a bit more about my workflow. So that's been a lot of fun too, and I found very rewarding. I really enjoy seeing people learning from my tutorials, and kind of the experience of paying it back, I feel is very, very nice, because this is the community that raised me, I guess, in a way, and got me into 3D. And now it's cool to kind of turn it around and kind of lend a helping hand and bring people into the fold as well. So that's, I guess, what I'm currently working on now. And then I'm also doing an animation course in Redshift. I've been trying to learn that now too. I used Octane for a number of years, but now I want to learn a bit more, I guess, of the Redshift side of things. So that's pretty cool too.
All right. And what area beside the area you're working on right now are you interested to explore and learn in future? What I mean by that is, imagine if you had like enough resources and time to be able to focus on something that you've been postponing, or you couldn't, you were busy. What is that?
Yeah, I think I've been wanting to get a bit more into illustration work. I've done a bit, and I do some for like some of the projects I work on. When I storyboard things out, I'll draw pictures. But there's like a really cool community on Instagram, especially I've seen it, where a lot of people do really cool drawings with Procreate on the iPad or with Photoshop and Illustrator. So I'm really inspired by the work I see on there, and I think it's a really cool way to kind of sketch things out. I kind of illustrate in a way, I guess, in 3D, but it'll be really cool to learn a bit more of the technical skills of how to properly draw something with pen and paper. I also really like VR too. I've been doing a lot more of this for some of my NASA projects, but I think it's kind of the future of the industry in many ways. So I'd like to kind of ride that wave and learn it a bit more and continue to develop my skills with that over the next couple months and years.
All right, we've come to the end, and with everything that's been said and done, to conclude everything we discussed, in this episode, give us a roadmap for someone who is zero in visual arts and wants to get to the place you are in terms of skill set, like when it comes to production and mostly 3D modeling and basically what you do.
Yeah, I think, like I was saying earlier, you have to be in the right mindset to start out with. You can't just be doing this just to be a 3D artist or just to whatever. You have to really have the motivation and drive to be able to learn and be open to criticism and failure along the way, because it is a really challenging field, very, very technical in nature. In addition to being artistic, you really just need to learn a lot of different things about optimization of your rendering, learning about texturing and lighting and shading. So it can get overwhelming, but you also have to be friendly, I guess, because there is such a strong community. So you shouldn't be afraid to reach out to people and kind of admit that you don't know something and allow them to teach you and to get you up to speed with the software. I think also just being open to just doing lots of experimentation and practicing and dedicating time. I mean, even when I'm super busy, I try to find even 20, 30 minutes just to allocate every day to just do something. Even if I'm not posting it online anywhere, it's just an exercise for me to just learn something new. And even if you kind of feel like you're going backwards, you're still making progress because you're learning new skills. You're learning what not to do, maybe in some cases, if your render doesn't work out, or if something didn't click properly with your shading or editing, whatever. So you're going to fail a lot along the way, but you just have to stay determined and stay with it and keep an open mind as you go through. And also don't be afraid to share your work too, to get criticism. I've tried to share as much of my work as possible on places like Instagram, ArtStation, just to get feedback from people. And it's really helpful because you're often staring at something so closely when you're working on it for so long that you kind of lose sight of what might be off with it or what to improve with it. So having an outsider's perspective looking at your work is always helpful, I found, to learn what you need to improve on or what might need fixing. And I found that the criticism that you get from this community isn't really destructive. People aren't just tearing you apart. Usually it's usually people saying, hey, your lighting is a little bit off here, and here's this tutorial that can teach you how to do this better. Have a look at that video and you'll learn how to do this thing. It's very supportive and it's really fantastic. So just keeping an open mind and keeping determined are definitely key to learning and growing as an artist.
All right, I think that's a wrap. Well, thank you so much for coming by. And where can anyone get in contact with you if they want it? It's at James _films on Instagram, right?
Yep.
And your email address is of course there. So yeah, and don't forget to check jamestralie.com. Of course, I'm gonna put it in the caption as well if you're interested to see the works, the videos, the animations we talked about in this episode. And there's that, and I hope you all have a good day, and see you in the next episode. Bye.